Hello, and welcome to Family Matters. My guest is Dr. Roberta Gilbert. Dr. Gilbert is a psychiatrist whose primary interest is in Bowen family systems theory and its applications for individuals, families, organizational leaders, and therapists. She's on the faculty of the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family and the founder and director of the Center for the Study of Human Systems and Extraordinary Leaders Seminar. 3 of her books, Extraordinary Leadership, The 8 Concepts, and The Cornerstone Concept, were written with leadership in mind and are used as texts for training of clergy and other leaders of various organizations. Dr. Gilbert has also decades of experience working with parents and wrote the book Connecting with Our Children, Guiding Principles for Parents in a Troubled World. When I first heard Dr. Gilbert talk about families, it was surprising to hear her refer to the parents as the leaders of their family. Of course, I knew about the relevance of parents in the functioning of a family, but I hadn't thought about it quite that way. I was intrigued. Today, I invite you to join me as I interview Dr. Gilbert to hear how she brings together her ideas about parenting and leadership. Dr. Gilbert, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
So where did you get this idea of putting those 2 concepts together?
Well, for a long time I had thought of parents as the leaders of the nuclear family. So it wasn't much of a leap for me when I was asked to train leaders of organizations to go back to the family. Also, I had been thinking about the family as a paradigm for all organizations. So that's just the way I think.
It came
It was
natural.
easy, yeah.
Now, what would be the difference between being the leader of the family and the trainer of the kids? Because I think my role as a mother sometimes is to train my kids to do things, but of course, the other concept is much more, it's larger.
Well, I think it's very similar. A parent is a trainer and a mentor to the children. The children, I think, naturally look to the adults to know what to do, how to do it, how to learn socialization skills, and they don't have to be told that the parents are the leaders of their family. Now, sometimes parents abdicate, and they kind of aren't. Mm-hmm. And the children will, at certain ages, will take over that leadership role. And then things are usually pretty much of a mess.
Give me an example of that, how that looks like in real life.
But one person I think of had a father who was gone in the military. He was a high-level military person. And the mother was mostly drunk. So this young lady decided and learned at a very young age to take care of her younger brother and anybody else in the neighborhood that needed taking care of, and to take care of her mother. So she was, in a sense, she was robbed of her childhood, I would say. But she also could be very bossy. Along with that experience came some characteristics that did not serve her well. And so she wanted to work on those in the seminar.
Right, and when you say that parents abdicate, it is scary to think that you need to be the leader of that group of very important people and very special people. At least when I heard it the first time, I thought, oh my God, I never thought about that. Now what?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that with a positive mind frame?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thinking it through and thinking through all the mind fields that go with it. I think it's possible for a parent to do too little parenting, to be too little involved with their children. Actually, what we're seeing in this day and age, and what I think Bowen saw more, was too much involvement with the children and too much closeness. And so it's possible to have too much parenting. It's possible to have too little parenting. And of course, what we're working for is to have just the right amount, whatever that might be.
what would be the problem of I see the problem of too little parenting. That I think it's more obvious, at least to the, to when you watch it. What's the problem of too much parenting? Parents that are very involved and that put all their energy into
Well,
their
the kids go off to college, and the college is overwhelmed with calls from these parents who haven't let go and haven't seen that their children need to go on to another milestone in their development, and are still talking to them on the cell phone several times a day, calling the college about every little thing that comes up. Many universities now have to have a department just to handle the parents.
So
Helicopter parenting.
Right. When you think about leadership, you describe that some leaders are doing less than they should, but most leaders tend to do more than they should.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the statistics would be on that.
Well, even if it's 50-50 or whatever, what my point was that that can translate into too much parenting and too much. But how do you explain too much responsibility? This seems to be that, to me, that can't be too much responsibility. You can never get there.
But what's the question?
What do you mean by too much responsibility or too much parenting?
Well, maybe I think what many of us do is treat our children as though they're younger than they really are. We don't grow along with them developmentally, and so we're really telling them what to do, which is appropriate for a young age maybe, but as they grow, less and less and less so. And the goal to have it would be for a very high level parent, I think the goal when the children reach adulthood would be to have an equal relationship with the child, a friendship. But many parents never get there. They're still thinking of them as that baby they brought home from the hospital, or somewhere in between.
Right. So what would be the indicators that one can move to the next step, leading the kids towards adulthood? How do you know? What do you have to observe?
I think you know by how old they are, what grade they're in, what other kids are doing. You read books. What are children at this age? What is expected of children at this age? And sometimes kids have to be a little bit prodded and pushed, and sometimes they need more time to get to a certain stage. So parenting is a very complex task.
What learning from your training of leaders can you translate into parenting? What I mean is, what characteristics of a good leader can be translated into characteristics of a good parent?
Well, I think it goes both ways. What characteristics of good parenting can be translated into leadership, and the other way around. But I think high-level parents and high-level leaders tend to be the calmest emotionally in the room, for starters. They tend to know what they think, but they don't make everybody go along with that. They know what they think for self, but it's okay for people to disagree.
I'm thinking, I mean, you're going to continue with that list, but I'm just thinking of an example of a family that I'm working with, that the daughter, who's 15, she says that she cannot disagree with her parents, particularly with her dad, because they know how things are, and it's very hard to put out a different thought. So that doesn't seem to be very much of high-level parenting.
Right. So maybe, is there any chance you'll be able to work with the parents instead of the child?
Sure. Yeah.
There.
And I'll go into there in a minute. So continue with other characteristics that are similar for good parenting and good
high-level
leadership.
people, parenting or leadership in an organization, have thought through what they think about various issues, important issues. I mean, we can't think through what we think about everything in the world because the world is too big. But we can think through certain important things and know where we stand on them and be guided by them until we get different basic facts. If the facts lead us to change, we can change our basic principles. But I think that high-level parents know what they think about things, but they're open to their children finding their way. They don't hesitate to let people know what they think for self, but they don't put it on other people. You have to think the way I think. That would be low-level parenting, I think.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of basic ideas, and like if you're in an organization and you don't agree with how the leader is thinking about something, as a member of that organization, you always have the chance to leave or to get a new job or something to that effect. But in a family, particularly as a child or adolescent dependent on the parents, you don't have that opportunity.
You never have that opportunity because you're always in that family.
Yeah, and even if as an adult, you sort of distance from the family, that creates another set of problems then.
Exactly.
So how do you deal as a parent with a situation that you know for yourself, you have very clear your ideas for self, and the others in the family think differently, and then it creates a conflict? Then what happens?
Well, it doesn't have to, though. In an organization, you have the choice of leaving the organization, finding another job. In the family, you really don't. So that's where the analogy breaks down,
okay,
I think. But in a high-level family, you can disagree without leaving. Now, for example, my son and I disagree on politics. He thinks one way and I think the other way. I probably should have used the different side of the room there. But anyway, we decided that while we don't agree on politics, we could still have a great relationship. So to me, that would be me taking a good step up in my functioning to get to that point.
Being able to be in the room with someone who thinks differently
And like them.
and like them. Okay, well, okay. When in your
And remember that I used to think the same thing myself.
okay, well, and we're not getting into into that territory now.
More specifics.
Yes. In your book, you say the following, and I'm quoting: "People working on themselves in the family of origin find that they become leaders there. They do not become leaders by setting out to lead anyone but themselves." Can you explain what you mean by that? I think that's an important.
Yeah, I think that's another characteristic of high-level leadership. It isn't about leading other people. It's about leading myself to the next level of functioning. What would the next level up in human functioning look like for me? What do I need to work on, in other words? So, it isn't about telling people what to do. Now, for me, I was a doctor before I was a parent. Now, a doctor is very bossy because a doctor goes into the hospital ward, writes an order, and it's the job of about 6 people to carry out that order. I mean, it's law. So what I wrote in the hospital record was law. It had to be done. So shall it be done. It must be done. But when I had children, if I told them to do something, they might or they might not do it. Mm-hmm. So that was a little different. I had to learn maybe a little bit different way of being, a little softer way of being, and a way that asks questions sometimes rather than gives orders. Well, that was refreshing.
Okay. So that would represent like a step up for you in the way you were behaving.
Yeah, yeah.
For others, it's maybe the opposite. If they need to step up and be firmer.
Right, right. I was at Costco yesterday and I saw 2 tiny little tots run right out into the street, and the Costco worker ran out behind them and grabbed them because there are cars going by there all the time. And the parents were just kind of in la la land and not really worried about it and wondering what all the fuss was about. Right. And the children were tiny and they really did need to be grabbed and told, come back. So they were at a different age than.
Sure. Yeah, I think that really describes the level of responsibility that the parents need to have, and it changes. Now the thing is that it changes so quickly that by the time you're used to something and you learn something, the children are grown. And
Isn't it true?
You never catch up somehow. Let me go to a different aspect of this conversation. In an organization, you have usually one leader, the CEO or the chief of something or the director. In a family, you have two. Now, how do you deal with that? It seems like it's hard to have two leaders at the same level, or is it possible? What do you think about that?
Well, when children are very young, actually there probably is more one leader, the mom or the caregiver. It may be the dad, or it may be someone else. But as they grow, what I think I see is parents spelling each other off, taking turns, being involved. And as they grow, it's more of a relationship with them than it is a leadership. I mean, leading myself rather than leading them. And this is very attractive. It's very attractive for me to lead myself and not try to lead other people. So when the kids start being attracted to the parents, they want to know what they think. They may not always agree with it, but they want to know what the parents think, if only as a point of departure. This is a high-level family.
In that moment, the focus really changes from the children to the parent, but maybe the focus should be there anyway since the onset. I don't know. But the importance of working on you as a parent rather than focusing all the time on what the children
It'll
should
change
do.
the whole complexion of the family. The whole complexion of the family, what the family thinks, how the family reacts, how people turn out is so much determined by how these parents think of self and how much self they actually have.
Would you measure the efficiency or effectiveness or the success of a parent by how the children do?
Probably. All things being equal.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, there may be some situations that we could dream up where the parents had less to do with how the children turned out. I think of fathers or mothers being called away to war, maybe not of their own volition, but in another way, that is something they signed up for. So that's going to have a huge effect on the family. And yet, different children and different families in that situation do turn out differently.
Too many variables, I guess,
There are many.
in one life story.
There are many.
I have a couple that came to bring for me to work with their daughter, another daughter, and this is 13-year-old daughter. And the mother came through the door, threw the girl into my office and left. Like, she really didn't, I mean, of course I had to talk to her later, but like, it was very clear, like, I don't want anything to do with this, just fix this girl. So when I sat with her and the husband and started talking about the importance of them being involved in whatever work we could do, that she very clearly said, well, I don't want anything to do with it because I'm so afraid of talking about my own family and my own story. I really don't want to engage in that. I tried to do it before, it didn't work. Don't count on that. And in my opinion, then that's like abdicating the responsibility. How do you help someone re-engage their responsibility when there's so much maybe pain or fear to go back and work on self?
Well, I've had parents call me up and with this situation, fix my kid. I don't want to do it, you do it. And I just simply tell them, I tried that for years. I did try that. I tried a different form of psychotherapy for many, many years, and I worked with kids, and I got a certain result. But I get a much better result when I work with the parents. And I find it much more effective and much more helpful because parents are with the child 24/7. I'm only there an hour a week at best. Parents are there 24/7. If I could work with you and coach you a little bit, I think you could do much more at being a good coach for your child than I ever could. Most of those parents could hear that. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of, as you said in the other program, something about inspiring them to have a reason to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to embrace the responsibility that parenthood represents. I mean, maybe not all of us thought about it in time, but now you're here and you sort of take it or not, and you can face the challenge or not.
Right. And I think there are grave consequences for people who don't take up the challenge and get involved with their kids.
Now, when you work with parents to become the best leaders of their family they can, you guide them to work on their other relationships, not only with the kids, but backwards to the family of origin.
True.
What's the connection there? How working with other relationships make a difference in your nuclear family?
Oh, how does working on your family of origin make a difference in your nuclear family? I don't know. It's some kind of magic. Slow magic. If magic can be said to be slow. For example, when I went back to my nuclear family, to my family of origin, I was very cut off from them. And so the first thing I had to do was get a relationship with them to begin with, and with my siblings. And as that started to happen, my nuclear family relationships smoothed out tremendously. How does that happen? I don't know.
Intriguing.
I don't know how that happens. I think it changes the brain chemistry and the brain anatomy. And that's about the best I can do with it, with that phenomenon. But I know the minute I started to get in touch with my parents, even though I hadn't done a lot of so-called work with them, my relationships weren't all that much better yet, but I had a relationship with them now. I wasn't shying away from them all the time. I know that I dropped a huge load of anxiety from within myself. Maybe that's what it has to do with.
And if a parent does that, gets rid of some of that anxiety, how does that translate into a better relationship with the kids?
Well, a less anxious parent, of course, makes better decisions, relates better in all relationships, including child-parent relationships, work relationships. So there's a kind of an upward spiral of dropping anxiety. A lot of anxiety goes away once people start interacting with their family of origin better. And the kids are the benefactors.
Sure. One aspect that I don't want not to talk about is the marriage and how the marriage needs to function in a certain way for the whole family to move forward. So sort of the leadership of the marriage, if you will. What have you observed as the importance of the functioning of the marriage?
Well, one time I asked Dr. Bowen that question. I said, Dr. Bowen, how do you become more of a self? How do you become a higher functioning person? What do you do? And he said, go to classes like you are. I was sitting in a class. Learn everything you can about this theory, read books, listen to lectures, listen to tapes, write your own ideas, and go back to your family and get coaching with that process of going back to your family and having better relationships with your parents. And later on I thought, and he also said, someone who's differentiating more self, the spouse will come up with them. So I often said to the class, there are two ways of differentiating a self. Go to classes, read, go back to your family, get coaching. And the second way is to be married to somebody who does all that.
Okay, that's a fast track.
And now, the question is, which is harder? I would say to the class, which is harder, being married to somebody who's doing all that work or doing all that work
Yourself. Mm-hmm.
And they would, about half the class would say one and half the class would say the other. But really, it's a trick question because they're both equally hard. Whenever one increases one's functioning, it's very hard work.
So when one thinks about a parent as a leader of the family, that cannot happen outside of the relationship with the other parent, whether you're married or not or whatever. But you cannot think about yourself as a good leader of a family if you don't work to a degree in that relationship with the other parent. Would that be accurate to say?
It won't go as smoothly. I mean, there are single families. Maybe the father is not alive.
Mm-hmm.
And there are single families where a mother does a very credible job, or a father does a very credible job of raising children by themselves. We know lots of examples of that. But certainly it's easier with another parent there to, when you get tired.
But I would argue that even if the father or the mother is not alive or is not available, what you think about that other parent has something
It's influential.
To do. Right.
I would argue that too.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Gilbert, we have to stop today, and I thank you a lot for your thoughts and sharing your experience of so many years working with parents in this troubled world.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind you that the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family offers the community affordable psychotherapy in both English and Spanish. If you would like more information about our topic or the services at the Bowen Center, please visit the website at www.thebowencenter.org or send me an email at familymatters@thebowencenter.org. You find us on Facebook or call 202-965-4400. Thank you for watching, and I invite you to join me again for another edition of Family Matters. I'm Dr. Mariana Martinez, and your family does matter.